Part 4 of Mike Perlak's film reflection videos, the Hellraiser series. And in Part 4, I'm going to be covering Deader, starring Kari Wuhrer. The antagonist in this story, a guy by the name of Winter, is referred to as a descendant of the toy maker by Pinhead, giving this movie a subtle continuity with the middle story in Bloodline, with the descendants of Le Merchant. More on that later. Kari Wuhrer plays a undercover reporter with a, quote, superior knowledge of skankology. When I heard that word coming from the Charlie character in the movie, I thought, that sounds to me like another one of those BS human studies degree the kids go to college to, quote, earn. Well, I guess they do earn it one way or another. So Charlie, the boss of the undercover reporter, is kind of like a boss, but also kind of a subtle father figure, I guess, for the character. He shows her a video of this cult guy named Winter, where he appears to take a life. But in the video footage, the person's not dead. As an investigative reporter, she's got to find out what's going on here. Well, her investigation leads her to a dead girl named Marla sitting on a toilet in her tidy whities. And instead of calling the cops, she tries to reach for a package and the box around this corpse that appeared to have strangled itself on the toilet. She does acquire the package, which is a VHS tape of the woman Marla, alive and well. But she gets the package and she gets the box and she goes home and crash. Now, I thought this was weird because wouldn't you call the cops if you stumbled across a corpse? Maybe the rules are different in Romania, which is where this is set. So she goes home and watches the tape, and this woman, Marla, the girl who's dead on the toilet, tells her basically that you got to help us out. We joined this cult guy, but not all of us knew what we were getting into. We're just kids, So that leads her to seek out help from a guy named Joey, where she goes to, it's basically a subway train that represents debaucherous purgatory. So, with the exception of the last movie, Judgment, the box more or less represents, for most of the Hellraiser films, pretty much all of them except the last one, represents temptation, especially the temptation of knowledge and truth. And the Charlie character in this one, the father figure in the story, does point out that the word demon is from Greek for knowledge. So after a direct encounter with this cult, especially the leader, Winter, where he basically tells her, she inquires about the box, what is it, what's it for, and he basically tells her it's kind of a family heir. Being that he is a descendant of Le Merchant. Then there's this surreal sequence in the movie where she wakes up with a knife literally stuck in her back. Pretty interesting scene. Actually pretty clever how she pulls it out. But I have to say, pretty fairly good acting from Kari Wuhrer in this movie. But So she gets the knife out, and then it's back to the Purgatory Express for more information. The story or plot thickens when it's revealed that she suffered abuse at the hands of her father. The kind of abuse I'm referring to is, I'm not going to go into details, but it's the worst. The highlight of this movie is the last 15 minutes. It's the last 15 minutes of this one is the most satisfying as far as plot and story goes, and best dialogue from Pinhead. But one of the elements to this one, and this goes back to what I was saying in one of the other parts about the concept of death, of spiritual death versus physical death. Because in this movie, it seems the concept of suicide is an act of redemption for one's soul. Which makes me think of, number one, Suicide Solution, that song Ozzy wrote years ago and got in trouble. And another thing that reminded me of is a Dennis Miller joke from his stand-up years ago, where he's saying about the human race and everything. It's like, look, if your life is so flunked up, you think the only answer is to hurt a little child? Buddy, you just gotta off yourself. Take one for the team. But that whole concept of suicide as an act of redemption for the soul made me think of those two things. But like I said, I think in the Hellraiser series, especially in the later movies, there is this distinctive difference between physical death and spiritual death. And I think that really goes into play in a lot of these Hellraiser stories. The concept of, you made your own bed kind of comes into play too. The character Joey, who seems to be confined to this debaucherous purgatory subway express, and the character Marla, who seems to be bond to Amy, the Kari Wuhrer character, more specifically, bound to get her to do what she couldn't do when she was alive. Sort of maybe like an act of redemption for her. I guess that's pretty deep for a horror movie. but that you could kill yourself and still get a heavenly reward. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the writers, there's some sort of Catholic Church stuff that I just don't understand. I don't know. But it just seemed like a circumference logic to me. I like I said, there might be some Catholic Church stuff that I don't understand in the story. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know about that. Being what has been revealed about the Catholic Church and priest in recent history. But take that as a grain of salt and do whatever you want with it, or think whatever you want. I'm going to back up a little bit here, going back to the knife in the back scene where Pinhead presents himself, and there actually is some curious dialogue in that sequence in the film. But you have to be very careful with the things that the Pinhead character says. You have to be careful with the Pinhead character's intent. When he speaks, he could be telling a truth or a self-serving lie. When he says stuff like, "You have been recruited in another man's war, a war he cannot win," could be referring to both her father and the Winter character. I don't know, but when he says that, he's actually speaking truth. But then on the other hand, when Pinhead says, "I am the, your only way out is through me. I am your redeemer. I am the way." Well, he's telling us flat out lie because he wants to condemn their soul. But after all that, she basically goes back to the Purgatory Express to find that Joey's gone and everybody there is spiritually deceased now. But then she does come face to face with the undead Marla. And Marla says to Kari Wuhrer's character, Amy, you're the one to free us. After this conversation, she goes back to a perceived normal, indicating she's not ready to accept truth yet. That's another common theme in these later Hellraiser movies, that the main character oftentimes is already deceased, and what their experience and what we're experiencing as the viewer is this person's like final test. The Marla says she's chosen, but the question is by what or whom? And perhaps it is the character Joey and Marla's realization that this cult they joined in life is wrong, is the very reason why they are stuck in a purgatory state. But they realized this after the facts, as they still gave themselves to this cult leader, so they're still technically lost. I don't know. Now we're getting into some theologian territory here over a freaking horror movie. But the Amy character does stand up to both the cult leader and Pinhead, so you could argue she is saved. But in doing so, she commits suicide. Like I said, I don't fully understand that, but it's not my movie. So, but like I said, maybe that's what they're going for. The movie itself, the story in the movie itself, is a form of purgatory for the main character. So, and the person's already dead, so her committing suicide is not not killing her physical self in the physical world, but more just sacrificing themselves for the greater good. I don't know, maybe Joey and Marla, in the grand scheme of things, will ultimately be saved, their souls, despite what is suggested in the film otherwise. I don't know. Maybe she was, the Amy Klein character was dead the whole damn movie. The movie itself was purgatory. People who don't understand these movies probably would say, just watching the damn movie was purgatory. I suffered like... Okay, so Pinhead is killed off in a light explosion, much like Bloodline. The character Charlie seems to be revealed as some kind of a guardian angel for ambitious but troubled females. I'm going to try to wrap this one up. I just wanted to talk about the elements to this movie that make it, that really make it have some subtle continuity with Bloodline. The toy maker from Bloodline, the cult leader in Deader is showcased as a descendant of thereof. The father in the middle part of the story in Bloodline uses his gifts to work with light reflection theory. Was a genius in his field, in the field of study thereof, as indicated in Bloodline. This guy, the cult leader in Deader, uses his skills to manipulate others' lost souls to glorify himself. So, all of us have freedom of choice when it comes to good and evil. I thought it was important to explore the subtle continuities between these two films in the series because, as I already stated, Bloodline to me gives the series as a whole such closure. You could argue that this guy Winter in this story is the little boy from Bloodline, and maybe his linear inherited talent, the genius that his father had in his work with light theory, he chose to use those talents for dark. in the memory of a 3-year-old being taken by a guy with pins in his head, and then watch the same guy decapitate his father. And perhaps at some point off the covered story in that movie, Bloodline, he loses his mother and is now a lost kid himself, lost himself with some flunked up memories as a child, just trying to make sense out of it all. Boy, did I just turn a villain into a sympathetic character? Some of you might say, well, what about the boy? It's not necessarily clear in Deader, no, if he is the boy from Bloodline. Maybe he was a deadbeat dad. I don't know. That would explain the Romanian setting. This guy, he knows what he's going to do, what he wants to do, and he's going to do what he wants to do. So he knows it's easier if I go do this in Romania, where it's easier to elude authorities and proceed with my plan. Well, that may be true about Romanian authorities, but in this story, not true about a certain undercover reporter, Amy Klein, played by Kari Wuhrer. All right, let's end this one with my favorite dialogue from Pinhead in Hellraiser Deader. When he finally comes to get the Winter character, the guy, the cult leader. Seems evil runs in the family. Your ancestor was a craftsman, a maker of toys. You should have stayed in the family business. He goes, and then with the box, it belongs to me. It's mine. And Pinhead says, I sacrificed my mortal self for that box. He says, it belongs to me. It's mine. And Pinhead says to him, that's where you're wrong. Painfully wrong. We belong to it. And then he kills the Winter character in the traditional Hellraiser fashion. The change. Anywho. One last line after that's all said and done that stood out for me, what I liked in regards to all the cult followers. Pinhead turns to all of them and says, this world has obviously disappointed you all. Allow me to finish what he began.